Today I'm talking about empathy and law. The two might not go together, but actually there's been a lot more demand recently for the empathetic lawyer. So today I've invited Mimi Nicklin to talk about empathy and the legal profession. Mimi is a big believer in the power of empathy to drive businesses and social growth by increasing humanity and connectivity in the workplace. She's also the host of Empathy for Breakfast, a weekly breakfast show where she explores the topic of empathy, and the author of Softening the Edge, which is a leadership book that addresses the growing empathy deficit in society. On top of all of that, she has over 15 years experience in the advertising industry. Mimi, welcome.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
It's such a pleasure. Thank you for coming.
No, I'm very excited. I've never spoken to anyone about law and empathy before in Dubai, so this is a great way to
It's a great
start.
topic, actually, and I don't think it's discussed that much. So I'm also really excited. Let's get straight into it.
Yeah.
Sounds like a simple question, but what is empathy? Because some people can confuse it with sympathy.
Yes.
How would you describe it?
Really good questions, and one I get asked all the time. At its simplest, empathy is about perspective taking. So you'll often hear people say it's about standing in someone else's shoes, it's about seeing the world from their perspective. I talk a lot about the business world, the corporate world today, the legal world, and as I said, at its core, this is about understanding how other people experience or see things around you. So it's a much more pro-social way to see the world, which has a whole host of benefits, to corporate organisations and the business world. And to answer your question about empathy and sympathy, empathy is about taking perspective, it's about understanding others. It's something that brings you closer together. If I empathise with you, we become closer, more closely connected.
Okay.
Sympathy is a form of pity. It's not a bad emotion, but it's a very different emotion, and it creates distance. So if you tell me something that makes me feel sad for you, I go, oh, I'm really sorry about that. But I don't come into you. I go, okay, well, I feel sorry. I've expressed my pity for you, and I'm moving away. Empathy is always an emotion that is used to help drive deeper understanding of a person or a situation.
That's such an interesting way of putting it. I hadn't thought of it in that way in terms of connection and distance. So you mentioned there that there are obviously benefits that empathy can have. And I hear you talk a lot in your content and your work about empathetic influence and regenerative leadership. Can you kind of explain maybe some of these concepts and just how empathy generally can be beneficial for organisations?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the reality is we have an empathy deficit in the world, and that's a term that was coined by President Barack Obama back in 2006. So 15 years ago, on a global stage, this was being recognised, and yet very little has been done about it. We've experienced 30 years of declining empathy levels, and that continues in the world. So there are a whole host of detrimental impacts of having low empathy in the corporate world. High absenteeism, low morale, low loyalty, high staff turnover, even lower performance and lower output and effectiveness. Because fundamentally, when people are disconnected, when people are feeling isolated, that they're not understood, they don't perform as well as they do. Because as humans, our greatest need is to be seen and to be heard. That's like at the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy, right? We want to know that we're being seen and that people understand us. And when that doesn't happen, even if that's in the corporate environment, between teams, between bosses and their teams, people just don't perform to their optimal. So yeah, there's a host of reasons why the corporate world could and should be benefiting from this. And it's not just me saying this. There's a lot of data out there now that shows that when organizations are emotionally connected, intelligent, empathetic, business performance improves. So it's not just my opinion, it's the opinion of many.
No, you're right. There is a lot of content out there, and actually increasingly more so in relation to the legal industry.
Yeah.
And so I want to talk about, now we've established what empathy is, I want to kind of talk about the relationship between empathy and law, because empathy is a skill that has been neglected in legal education, legal training, and although there is a lot more demand for it now, it's kind of been gaining prominence, it still doesn't carry as much authority as some other legal skills, let's say commercial awareness or project management.
Yeah, for sure.
So what would you say to lawyers who maybe view it as being a little bit touchy-feely? What would you say to convince them, about the benefits of empathy specifically for them and the legal practice, specifically?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's a conversation that's changing in the legal world. The more I research, the more I see the conversation is increasing, amongst lawyers, amongst the legal community. As far as I'm concerned, there are no lawyers that can't or wouldn't benefit from being more empathetic, from fundamentally listening better, because listening is probably one of the core pillars of being empathetic, of being able to understand. Lawyers that can listen better have a whole lot of opportunity out there to perhaps improve their craft, their skills, their commercial outcome. There's probably 3 areas that I think are worth touching on for any lawyers that are listening to us. The first, of course, would be with your clients. So better understanding of your clients. If you can understand your client better, listen to them better, know what they want, what are they looking for, put yourself in their shoes. If I were them, how often would I want to hear from my lawyer? How often would I want an update on my case? Not only do you build better relationships, which means you work better as a team, a legal counsel and client team.
Yeah.
But also you're building more loyalty between the two of you. You're likely to impact the outcome that you're both working towards because you are understanding of each other and that client feels more connected. So that would be the first one. The second one would be working with your adversaries, or the lawyer that's on the other side of the table, as it were. Because if you can understand them better, of course, there's a host of benefits. So better relationships, always good if you're walking into a legal debate or discussion. If there is a deeper understanding between you and the other legal counsel, you're starting on the right foot.
Absolutely.
But also because you're more likely to be able to develop strategic approaches that perhaps allow you to take the upper hand in that discussion, or direct the discussion where you want it to go, because you know what that lawyer is looking for and how they see the world. Equally likely, you might then have more positive outcomes, of that for you and your client. So that would be my second. The third would be there's very few environments where caring more, listening more doesn't go a long way. Now, I run a business. This is not softly charity, healthcare work. No, I run a profitable business. I write and talk about using empathy to drive corporate performance whilst balancing that with people. So when I talk about caring more, this is not instead of making money, right? This is not about doing things for free, pro bono work. But Theodore Roosevelt once said, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care, right? And it's so true.
That's a great saying.
Because if you had the 2 best lawyers in the world in the room to choose from, everything else remaining equal, as humans, we will gravitate towards the ones that we think care a bit more, get it a bit more, understand us a bit more. So when I talk about, caring more has great gains, it's in a commercial sense. As people, we connect with people that connect with us. It's contagious, actually.
Yeah.
So that's going to drive you not, again, only in your performance as a team or, with teams of other lawyers or clients, but also in new business, right? If you're pitching, if you're trying to drive new clients into the legal firm you represent, those that people feel understand them as human beings are likely to have that upper hand.
Absolutely. So, because I think lawyers do tend to focus a lot on the technical aspects, but if they really want to stand out, long-term focusing on empathy and just social skills and building connections can really help them, like you said.
Yeah, I think so.
So my understanding is that empathy is a skill that can be learned.
It is.
Okay, good. So based on that, what can lawyers do to improve their empathy levels, practically speaking? How can they implement it into their day-to-day work? You mentioned listening more.
Yes, listening is, I always talk about it as the backbone to empathy, but it's not just listening to hear, although that is a really important skill. And across the board, not just in the legal industry, we don't teach that enough. Actually, we forget. We think that we know how to listen, but it's probably one of the most underutilized skills that we have as people, actually. So I talk a lot about active listening, which is really listening to hear what people are saying and not to make a decision yourself or to judge or to plan your answer, which I would imagine if I was a lawyer, I would probably naturally fall into doing, right? Because you're listening to your client and you're thinking, what should I tell her? What's the answer? Which, legal clauses are relevant to this discussion? Active listening is about listening to the person in full first before you go on to then, find the information that is useful to respond to that.
Okay.
Also, listening is about tone of voice. So again, if you're in a room with adversaries or you're around a table, there's a debate going on, looking at the tone of voice, who's faltering, who's confident, who's overconfident, and what does that mean about their state of mind or their opinion. The words people are using, body language. I'm sure you've heard that 93% of communication is non-verbal, right? But we don't practice that enough either. So, looking at whether people are crossing their arms or leaning back or their eyes are flicking around the room, if you can tune into that, you can often gain really great insight about what makes somebody uncomfortable, what makes them motivated. The majority of skills really sit in the area of listening, of tuning in to other people. And these are skills, and we know the data shows it is teachable. It is a skill. It's something we've evolved to have in our brains. It sits in our prefrontal cortex. We're all born with the same amount of it. That's also another.
So men and women as well.
Men and women, we're all born with the same, more or less.
Okay.
It's a choice. It's about how you use it and practicing the use of that, just like practicing golf or cooking or anything else, right? The more you do it, the more you practice it, the better it comes. And as I said, this is not a soft skill, it's actually a hard skill, both to master, but also from an outcome point of view, it will have hard impact, it will have positive impact on understanding that room. So yeah, listening, body language, tone of voice, and of course your own then is really important. So self-empathy, understanding yourself, how you appear in a room, the body language you're using,
how you're coming across,
eye contact, shoulders being square to people, those types of things make a massive difference to how people respond and the information they're willing to give you, which again, if I was a lawyer, I would imagine that's really important.
I'm going to be a lot more conscious now, I think, when I walk into a room of how I'm coming across and what others are doing. So, so we've talked about, how to improve empathy, but I want to just focus finally on empathy in the context of legal marketing and particularly writing, because when we're marketing ourselves or our services, it's often indirectly through maybe articles on specific legal topics to show that we're thought leaders in that area. Now, when we think of successful marketing, and the reason I ask you is you've had over 15 years experience in advertising, so you know all about this. But my understanding is that most successful brands, they're successful because they're able to establish like a form of emotional connection with consumers. The difficulty that lawyers have is the legal topics don't really facilitate the use of emotions because they're quite technical, but also we're trained to write in a very clear, structured, logical way. There isn't as much attention to empathy, I guess. So I was just wondering, do you have any practical tips on how we can create more empathetic content as part of our business development strategy?
Look, I think, as I mentioned earlier, the reality is the more connected you are to humanity, to human beings, you're right, the more impactful that marketing will be. There are always going to be people that want that really functional, clear, data-led information. So this is not to say that that doesn't have a place. But certainly from an advertising and marketing point of view, you're right. The communication that has more emotionally driven point of view, or might just be a headline or a connection point to pull people in, is what's going to make the difference. The reality is we're all humans, right? All the lawyers watching this, they're all people. They all can do this. It's just a matter of taking a moment to say, if I was the reader reading about this new law in, child protection, why would I be reading it? Not just to get the information, really important that I, as someone who's interested in that, am getting the information. How can you capture them? What's the image you use? What's the type of headline or copywriting you use? Same in email communication. If you're a law firm that sends out lots of emailers to your clients, you can do something called A/B testing, which is basically when you test which emails work better than others, right? So you send the same email so you have a group of people, you send the same email to two halves of that group with slightly different headlines or openings.
Oh, wow.
And then from your CRM system, from your whatever system you sent that email from, you'll be able to monitor which ones are doing better, what type of messages resonate with different types of clients. So there might be a little bit of trial and error, but certainly the right type of words, emotive words, again, not soft words. When I say emotive, that could be aggression, right? Could be anger. These don't have to be soft emotions, but how do you provoke attention? Probably not with a legal clause. Possibly.
Yeah, I think you're probably right.
But yeah,
on that
there's
one.
probably other ways.
Absolutely. I mean, I have to say this conversation has been so fascinating, Mimi. I'm so grateful for all of your knowledge and your expertise. I have to say I think a lot of law firms are listening. They are becoming a lot more customer centric these days. But even so, I think just to acknowledge that more can be done and to always put empathy at the forefront of our minds is important. Thank you so much. Before you go, I have your book here, Softening the Edge. It is out. Can you tell people if they want to read more about this topic, how they can get a copy?
Yes, for sure. It's on Amazon.com and Amazon.ae, and it will soon be available at all good bookstores. So you can pretty much find it anywhere, but definitely online if you search for it, you'll find it.
And I will be getting a copy of this for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mimi. And we will actually be continuing the conversation with Mimi on our next video on the Door to Law, talking about empathy and technology. Thank you.